Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 RSM DFS Tactics show. Got a lot to cover tonight. We got some lineups to make. Check out the rankings. Let's check some weather. See what metrics and filters ended up in the final mixed condition model. All of that good stuff. Plus a few announcements here. So with this being the final event for the fall portion of the schedule, Calls schedule will change starting next week. We'll be going Tuesday evenings at 9 p.m. and then Friday for the Friday night chill stream at 8 p.m. Both of those times Eastern. And depending on demand, I will be live in the mornings on Twitch still as well. But as far as definite YouTube content, it will be Friday at 8 p.m. and Tuesdays at 9 p.m. So make sure you adjust your calendars, your reminders for that. Reminder that this Friday evening will be another Friday Night Chill stream. We're going to be doing some Showdown content, and I also found a new game that I have been enjoying for the past couple of days, so I thought I would share that with you. So hopefully you decide to check it out on Friday evening. Really laid back, have music going on in the background, open for discussion. We can talk about anything that the community wants to, so just come by, hang out, spend a little bit of your Friday evening with myself and the community after a long work week. I believe that is everything, and if I forget something, hopefully I will remember it by the end of the show. But let's do what we're here for. So, all statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best tool out there. It's going to make you a much better gambler, much smarter DFS player. I wouldn't be able to do what I do without it. With the statistical analysis, it is great for Showdown, which I am going to begin exploring increasing that coverage or that content. So if you are interested in that as well, leave a note in the comments, jump in chat and mention it, reach out to me social media, let me know if you have any ideas around how you might want the Showdown content to increase, or what ideas you might have for more streams, more shows, more content, all that stuff. Then there are links in the description to the video to all of my social media, Twitter and Instagram. I posted research earlier this week to both of those places regarding the pattern of winners. I will also be posting my betting card for the RSM after the show tonight. So if you want to see a summary of the research that I do or my betting card, give me a follow to Twitter, Instagram. I also post my research as well. But there is also a link to Twitch where the majority of my Showdown content will be focused, or is focused right now, as well as some of the side content, if you will, more gaming and such. So if you're interested in that content, give me a follow at the link to Twitch in the description. And then finally, we're live. Chat is open. Want to hear from you all. What kind of players did you focus on this week for the RSM? Is there an overriding theme among them? Who are your top pivots? Who are your top fades? How much do you think the weather is going to play a factor? Want to hear from you all that good stuff. Also, if you have any questions on this player versus that player, lineup questions or lineup construction theses, if you will, or ideas, make sure you throw them out in the chat and we can work around them. But let's do what we're here for. Let's figure out our strategy and our tactics for the 2023 RSM. And we're going to start with Windfinder. And we saw a little bit on Monday. The forecast really hasn't changed all that much. This is where, before I get too far into it, with the RSM, you have the Seaside course and the Plantation course. And there is no afternoon or morning wave and afternoon wave per usual. The golfers will start at 9 a.m. local time, 9 a.m. Eastern, and the last group will tee off at 11 a.m. Eastern. They just keep it rolling throughout the day. So no AM or PM wave per se. But you can see here from the forecast, there is certainly a disadvantage tomorrow for a certain group of players. And that group, sorry, I am adjusting chat settings and such. The players that are teeing off the earliest are at a pretty big disadvantage tomorrow compared to the rest of the cut, especially tomorrow. The wind is actually supposed to die down during the day, which is very uncommon, but all we can go by is the wind forecast. So a pretty big disadvantage for the players that are teeing off early tomorrow. But again, there is no afternoon wave like usual. The first tee time is at 9 a.m. The last tee time is at 11 a.m. So everyone is teeing off within 2 hours of each other. But clearly, if the majority of your round is later in the day, it looks to be more beneficial to you. And then Friday looks chilly, but pristine in terms of golf conditions. Not a lot of wind, not a lot of gusts. So Friday looks to be a wash in terms of any kind of advantage for either wave. So clearly, anybody who is teeing off in the afternoon tomorrow has a bit of an advantage. With that said, because there are two courses in play, Seaside is traditionally the more difficult of the two courses here at the RSM. You have Seaside and you have Plantation. Anybody playing the Plantation is going to have an advantage on their day because it is an easier course, or traditionally has been easier in terms of scoring than Seaside. So take all of this into consideration when figuring out the players you want to use or any adjustments to your own personal rankings. Just because a player is teeing off at 9 a.m. doesn't mean they should be completely thrown out of your consideration, especially if they're playing on the Plantation course. But ideally, in a perfect world, the players that you would want to target, and I'm not talking Showdown specifically, although it most applies to Showdown. But the biggest advantage that I see this week are players that are teeing off as late as possible tomorrow at the Plantation course. So that is the best advice I can give you based on this forecast for any kind of field split. I would not put a whole lot of emphasis into it. I mean, as you can see, everybody is going to be teeing off in some kind of wind. Now, if you are teeing off early, you are dealing with more wind in your round than the others. But it certainly is helpful to have the late tee time. And then, again, Plantation should be, or has traditionally been, the easier of the two courses. So that is what I can give you in terms of a field split preference in the way I'm looking at it. I'm not doing a whole lot, but certainly using a tiebreaker later in the day, Plantation, that kind of deal. You see Friday there doesn't appear to be much, and then the weekend really doesn't appear to be much at all either. So with that, I am actually going to skip the wind per se. I do have a little bit of info for you all, but I'm going to go straight into my mixed condition model. And when I finalized my mixed condition model, there were a couple of metrics that I wanted to use, and I didn't get to them. And I'll explain them. But as we go through this, 15% in birdies or better, easy to par. And we looked at this in several different ways. Birdies are better easy, birdies are better short. I think I've mentioned it a few times now, but just as a reminder, if I'm looking at a scoring metric, say birdies are better, I like to use the scoring filter: easy, difficult, etc. Now, certainly it is valuable to look at birdies or better on short, but in terms of a mixed condition model or rankings, I'm using birdies or better when it's easy. Instead, we talked about this on Monday night when I looked at last year's RSM mixed condition model. I used opportunities gained, and also when I looked at last year's mixed condition model, the leading statistic for the players that performed the best relative to my rankings, the leading statistic was strokes gained total on short courses. And I'm not doing anything in terms of strokes gained total this year. So I wanted to make sure I covered short course filters somehow, and I thought opportunities might be the best way to do that, especially considering this course is easy. Birdies and eagles happen a fair amount. So I felt like that was a very good combination to use, or a very good metric, the opportunities gained, in combination with birdies or better, to use the short course filter. So I have 10% in opportunities when it is short, combined with 15% birdies or better gained when it's easy. Again, especially with the wind forecast, minus tomorrow, especially early tomorrow, looks to be fairly difficult. The rest of the week looks very, very good for scoring, so I imagine a lot of low scores if players make the cut, especially going into the weekend. So that was the crux, the main part of my mixed condition model. I have 10% in strokes gained putting, fast Bermuda greens. And this is one where I toyed back and forth with going 5 to 10%. I toyed with removing the fast filter since the wind is supposed to pick up. Are they going to slow it down tomorrow? I don't know. I don't have those answers. Surprisingly, Houston last week at Memorial Park, 3 of the 4 rounds there were average speed. So I am a little less confident about the fast Bermuda. 10%, even though this is the most strokes gained by shot type, it is not truly indicative of who performs well, or at least previous players that have played well here don't necessarily have the best Bermuda form coming in. So I don't want to overrate players like Denny McCarthy, Brendan Todd, these players that are traditionally just good putters, because the course doesn't reward traditionally great putting. It's just who's hot that week. So hopefully that makes sense. I got 10% in strokes gained putting fast Bermuda, 10% in proximity 150 to 175, and this is where I think I'm going to be different than a lot of the experts in the industry. I think this is going to be the most important range of proximity. If it's not, then this is 10% that is very off in my mixed condition model, and I'll own it next week or whatever. But I have a strong suspicion this is going to be the most important proximity, and I did not feel that total prox was very important. It could be 125 to 150, but this felt, again, looking at historical leaderboards, the form of players coming in, this felt the most important. So 10% in the specific proximity 150 to 175, 10% in par 3s, and 5% split out into the 200 to 225s. I wanted to put more percentage here, ran out of percent. So if these are indeed more important, then I am undervaluing the players that play this length of par 3s well. But the par 3s generally important. 10% in par 4s, 10% in par 4s 400 to 450, 5% in par 4s 350 to 400. I mentioned this on Monday. I had 20% in par 4 total in last year's mixed condition model and 15% here. A little bit heavy, so instead I split it out a bit more, added the 350 to 400 5%, and dropped the total par 4. and technically dropped the 400 450 as well a little bit. But par fours are going to be a big factor. We saw this in the data dive. The leaderboards, I mean, players just have to play par fours well. So I've got 25% across par fours in different ways. 10% in the length of the par fives here at the RSM, 550 to 600 degrees, the length of the par fives that matter. And then finally, 5% in strokes gained approach, like I thought was going to happen. 20% was way overdone, or 15%, whatever I had last year was way overdone. It was my first year making a mixed condition model for the RSM. Needed to adjust, and that is the adjustment that I made. So I've mentioned a little bit on what I could be weak to. Scrambling, if that does end up mattering, don't have anything in there. I also didn't fit around the green. I felt like if around the green was going to matter, then players are going to be not a factor in the tournament. That's why I went birdies are better gained and opportunities, as opposed to strokes gained around the green, because I know we looked at strokes gained around the green throughout the week, but in the end, I figured that I just wanted to see players who hit the green and gave themselves the most opportunities. Now it's just a matter of them making the putts. So that is the lean that I went with the mixed condition model. Now, before I go to Microsoft Excel, I want to highlight 6 players for you all. 6 players, and that's why I've come over here. I haven't closed it all out completely. 6 players that are top 40 in all 3 major categories that we looked at this week. And when I talk about major categories, I'm talking about when it's easy relative to par, when it is short, and when it is windy. I just happen to have the windy filter checked right now. I was doing a little bit of last minute research, filling out my teams earlier in the evening. So if you are, as you are seeing this list of top 10, this is the rankings, strokes gained total for when it's windy. If you are so inclined, I don't think it's going to make a big deal. However, I want to highlight 6 players for you all this week that are top 40, or the top third of the field in all 3 of those major categories. The first one will be no surprise. It's Seamus Power. Seamus Power is number 1 in strokes gained total when it is easy, number 1 in strokes gained total when it is short, and he's also top 35, top third of the field in the wind. So that's the first of the 6 players I want to highlight for you all. The second is Tom Hoge, and I'm very, very high on Tom Hoge. You can see he's 3rd in the wind. In fact, he is top 10 in all 3. He's 3rd in the wind. He's 3rd in short, and I believe he is 2nd when it is easy. I think that's how it went. I just wrote down that he's top 10 in all. So Tom Hoge is the best cumulative of everybody in terms of strokes gained total in the 3 major categories. He's top 10 in all. The third player I want to highlight for you all is Matt Kuchar. Matt Kuchar is top 15 in all 3 major categories. He's 5th in the wind, and he's top 15 when it's easy, top 15 when it is short. The fourth player is Patrick Rogers. He is top 20 in all 3, windy, short, and easy. The last 2 are simply top 40 in all of them. Ben Griffin, top 40 or top third of the field in all 3 strokes gained total major categories we looked at this week. Again, easy, short, and windy. Ben Griffin's the 5th player. The 6th player I want to highlight for you all, Lee Hodges. Lee Hodges is also top 40 in all 3 major categories. I love bots. We are removing that. So there you go. There's the 6 players that I wanted to highlight in terms of strokes gained total because I knew I wasn't going to cover the wind specifically. Now, with that said, there have been some more field changes. So, when we go to Microsoft Excel, before we get too much further into it, there have been 3 more field changes I have seen since Monday evening. The biggest one being Tony Finau, the tournament favorite. He was also the only player in the 11Ks. He is withdrawn. Ryan Moore also withdrew earlier Monday. The other player actually was not populated yet per Fantasy National, so he doesn't have a readout essentially. But it's William McGirt, and I mentioned late Monday that I kind of like the idea of a top 20 or a placement bet on William McGirt. Well, hopefully you didn't put that in that quickly because he has withdrawn. So all in all, there have been 7 field changes for the week. Those players, again, the first 4 we covered Sunday and Monday: Siwoo Kim, Brendan Steele, Eric Van Rooyen, and Mark Hubbard. So there was those 4. And then since Monday evening, you've had Tony Finau, Ryan Moore, and William McGirt withdraw. So those 7 total field changes. But now let's go into my rankings for the week. And again, a reminder, this only is factoring in my analytics from Fantasy National, the previous course history, and projected ownership. I have not put a factor on tee time and how I think, say, somebody that's teeing off late at the Plantation course is more favored than somebody who's teeing off early at Seaside. Tee times has nothing to do with my rankings. This is just in a vacuum, purely by numbers. But my top 10, factoring in analytics, previous course history, and projected ownership, my number 1 player, Tom Hoge. Again, top 10 in all 3 of the major categories we talked about: short, easy, and windy. So Tom Hoge, number 1. Taylor Moore, number 2. Matthew Neesmith, Jason Day, Chesson Hadley, Russell Knox, Grayson Sigg, Andrew Putnam, Brian Harmon, and Cameron Percy round out my top 10, with Tony Finau having withdrawn. So there's a look at my top 10. I'm really high on Taylor Moore. I'll talk more about him as we go through the price board. Neesmith has played this event extremely well. Grayson Sigg might be a little bit of a surprise, but he has 1 bad statistic. It's getting caught off at par 4. So he's got 1 bad statistic. It's his approach. And I think strokes gained approach is going to be mitigated here. So I'm pretty high on Grayson Sigg again this week. He worked out for me 2 or 3 weeks ago at the Bermuda. So we're going to run it back a little bit with him. Jason Day, I'm a little concerned about his performance in the wind. But otherwise, the metrics are pretty darn good. Again, you don't have to have the strongest putting form coming in. And Jason Day can get hot with the best of them. Chesson Hadley, really like Chesson Hadley. He's number 1 at the long par 3s that matter here at the RSM. So yeah, let's go ahead and sort on this price board, and let's talk about some specific players, shall we? So we want column E, largest to smallest. All right, in the 10Ks, you now only have 2 players, Seamus Power and Brian Harmon. Seamus Power being 33rd is probably too low. He's getting hurt by the fact that he has not played this event well. He has missed the cut 3 out of the past 4 years that he's played here. But the metrics should love him. Again, number 1 when it's easy, number 1 when it's short. Top 35 in the wind. He goes low when it's easy. He gives himself plenty of opportunities when it's short. Now, the proximities are bad from 150 to 175. So if that is indeed the range that matters the most, could be in a little bit of trouble. He also has not hit his irons all that well. Remember, his win at the Bermuda, strokes gained approach was not calculated. There was no shot link there. So we didn't get that information. That number is probably a lot higher than what this is showing, thanks to the win at the Bermuda. I think 33rd is way too low on Seamus Power, and you see him at projected 9%. There's a lot to like here with Seamus Power. I like Seamus a lot this week. Brian Harman, a lot to like here as well. Played this event very well. Now he is going to be owned heavily. Again, putting, you don't have to have the best form. Par 5s, shoot, that's getting cut off. Top 20 in the length of the par 5s here. Top 15 in irons in short par 4s. Top 20 or top 25 in total par 4s. There's a lot to like here with Brian Harman. There's a reason he's going to be popular. I'm going to be using him. I'm going to eat a little bit of this chalk. I like Brian Harman. All things said, though, Seamus Power is my number one of these two in the 10Ks. I just don't understand why he's only at 9% owned. Yes, he has not played this event well. So if you are a big believer in prior course performance, course fit, all that stuff, then there's reason to be worried. I think Seamus is going to be pretty good this week again. Power number 1, Harman number 2, specifically talking about the 10Ks. We move to the 9s. Tom Hoge, Taylor Montgomery, Jason Day, Keith Mitchell, Joel Damon, Denny McCarthy, and Matthew Neesmith. Well, Tom Hoge, number 1 player. I don't care that he's so widely owned. I'm going to eat this chalk. I'm going to use a lot of Tom Hoge. If Tom Hoge does not play well, I'm going to struggle. 4th at birdies or better when it's easy. Gives himself enough opportunities. Honestly, the putting has been okay. And he's generally not a very good putter. The putter has been okay in 2022. Number 2 in total par 4 performance. It's getting cut off. Number 1 in strokes gained approach. In case that does play a big factor this week, he's very good at short par 4s. 6th in 350 to 400 par 4s. I'll just scroll over because there's a lot to highlight in the second half of this for Hoge. Top 10 in 400 to 450 par 4s. So he loves short par 4s, and they are in abundance here at the RSM. Love Tom Hoge this week. Taylor Montgomery getting hurt because he has not played this course, but still 20th in my rankings. He has gone low when it's been easy in his short time on the PGA Tour. I think he'll be useful. Jason Day, probably a bit too high at number 4. But again, he goes low when it's easy. Gives himself a lot of opportunities. It's just the putter. If the putter is bulky, and you can say that about anybody, but if the putter's bulky, he's going to struggle. Mitchell, fine. I'm just never a big believer in Keith Mitchell when a tournament is easy. You saw that he performed very, very well at Houston. He does his best work when it's difficult. It's not that he struggles when it's easy. He just doesn't take advantage of easy courses. He is a bogey avoider, not a birdie getter. And that is very, very useful on difficult courses, but not here at the RSM and other easy tracks. So I'm just not a big believer in Keith Mitchell. Joel Damon, very bad in the wind, so I have my hesitations with Joel Damon. You see the analytics like him. He's played this event fairly fine. He's pretty middling at a lot of these statistics. I'm just hesitant about his performance in the wind. It's generally pretty bad. McCarthy, okay. Again, I did not want to overrate him because it's not the most important to have putting form or be a great putter coming into the RSM. You just need to be hot that week, and that's true in a lot of places. Now, some tournaments it does pay, or it is very good to have seen those greens and all that stuff, but RSM's not one of those places. And then finally, Matthew Neesmith, again, top 10 in the wind, number 2 in par 3s, getting cut off top 10 in strokes gained approach. A lot to like here, but he is the second most projected owned player, Hoge, and then Neesmith, and I'm going to use plenty of both, but I'm going to use a lot more of Tom Hoge than I will of Matthew Neesmith, just because there's enough, I think, in the 8s that you don't have to use Matthew Neesmith if you don't want to. especially since Neesmith is at 9,000. So you can easily come down into the 8s. But in the 9s, I'm going to use Tom Hoagie, number 1 player. I'll use Matthew Neesmith. I like the player a lot. He's just very widely owned. McCarthy's okay. I'm cautious on, I shouldn't say very cautious. I'm cautious on Damon because of his struggles in the wind. I'm pretty much out on Keith Mitchell because it's an easy course. Day is probably way too high being 4th, but I think, again, this could be sneaky good for Jason Day. Montgomery should be serviceable. Moving into the 8s, you got Matt Kuchar, Sahith Theegala, Patrick Rogers, Mackenzie Hughes, Taylor Pendrith, Webb Simpson, Kevin Kisner, Justin Rose, Davis Riley, Wyndham Clark, and Brendan Todd. So let's talk about the player that I mentioned, kind of highlighted him Monday night. Webb Simpson. He is the leader in strokes gained total the past 5 years here at the RSM. He's only at 7.5%, and a lot of it is because he's coming off that injury. It was not as widely known as Harris English's injury, but he is coming off the injury, and that's why a lot of these metrics, and you see 149th. He was injured last year. That's why all of his metrics are struggling. Again, if you are a big believer in course or prior course performance, course fit, all that stuff, you have to consider Webb Simpson. I'm going to probably be using Webb Simpson even though he is so low in my rankings just because this is a Webb Simpson course. And if Webb Simpson does not play well here, then you know he is not fully back yet. Now, it won't answer if he's fully back if he does play well because this course fits Webb Simpson. He's generally played well here. But you would much rather play Webb Simpson too early than be too late on a player. So, yes, the metrics look awful. Take a long look at Webb Simpson, especially at 7.5%, is what I'm going to say. But elsewhere in the 8Ks, Matt Kuchar, top 15 in all of the 3 major categories we talked about, short, easy, and windy. Top 15 in all of them. He goes low when it's easy. Par 4s, 30th. The next column over here he's 7th in par 4s, 400 to 450 yards. He plays well on short courses. Plays well when it's easy. There's a lot to like with Matt Kuchar. Patrick Rogers, top 20 in all 3 of those major things. Now, he's got a lot worse statistics in terms of the putter and the proximity. And in fact, he hasn't given himself a lot of opportunities when it's been short. I don't know. I just believe that he is good when it's easy. And I believe that he is going to perform well on these par 4s. He's top 30 in total par 4s. He's 37th and 11th at the specific range of par 4s. He's also 6th on the long par 3s. And like I said, I wanted to put more than 5% in these long par 3s. Just ran out of percent. I think Patrick Rogers is going to be pretty darn solid. I think he's a fair price at $8,700. I think it's fair ownership at 9.5%. But there's a lot to like here with Patrick Rogers. Talked about Simpson. Kevin Kisner is the same way. He's a former champion here. Short hitter, generally pretty accurate. Number 1 on fast Bermuda greens. So if you're wanting to believe in putting and it being the most important statistic, then Kevin Kisner's your guy. Justin Rose played extremely well last week. I don't want to say it was an aberration, but he's kind of in that Ricky Fowler, Harris English, just string tournaments together for me, and I'll start to believe again. Wyndham Clark, I really, really like this week as well at 8,000 even. Top 25 in all 3 of these categories. Birdies are better when it's easy, opportunities when it's short. Fast Bermuda putting, he's top 25. He is top 20 in the par 5 lengths, and he's 3rd on short par 4s, extremely short par 4s. I like Wyndham Clark a lot. So there's a look at the 8Ks. We move into the upper 7s. Let's highlight a few players here. Andrew Putnam, talked a little bit about in the reveal of the top 10. He has one bad statistic. It's not even rated in pink. Just one bad statistic. You see he's top 5 in par 3s, 6th in par 4s. He's 3rd, 400 to 450 par 4s. There's just one bad statistic. It's not even getting colored in pink. So the par 5s could be an issue for him. But there's a lot to like here with Andrew Putnam. He is pretty popular. Be aware of that. But there's a lot to like here. Spawn, pretty interesting. He's getting a little bit of love. But I like JJ Spawn a little bit. A lot of it being around in these par 4s. He's 4th in total par 4s. He's 4th in 400 to 450 par 4s. That's the next column over. That's getting cut off. So I like JJ Spawn. Will Gordon, I like the player. I don't like the tee time. That'll tell you when he's teeing off. I like the player. Don't like the tee time. We've talked about Harris English enough. I mean, do you believe in the health? Scott Stallings, metrics say he should be pretty darn good. I don't know. He's not the best at getting birdies when it's easy, but he does give himself a lot of opportunities when it's short. I'm a little wary on Scott Stallings. The proximity is really bad, and over here getting off the screen, he's 103rd in approach. Not the favorite. Not my favorite. Chris Kirk, somebody that is very interesting, but like Joel Damon, I am a little bit concerned about his performance in the wind. I think it's wind. There was one of the three. Now I'm going to have to cheat. There was one statistic that he was very, very good, and one statistic he was very, very bad. No, so he's very good in the wind. So it must have been the easy. He has not traditionally been very good when it's easy. Apologies, I needed to double check that before I told you wrong. So Chris Kirk, very, very good in the wind, but you can see when it's easy, 142nd at birdies or better when it's easy. He is fine when it's short. I'm again, Plantation and Seaside both easy. A little concerned there. And then Grayson Sigg I love this week at 7,500. Don't sleep on David Lipsky either. Yes, the course value is very poor. He's only played it once. Don't sleep on David Lipsky. I think he could sneak up on some people this week. But with Grayson Sigg at the same price and only 0.4% projected more ownership, I'm much more confident in Grayson Sigg than David Lipsky. Don't sleep on Lipsky. So there's a look at the upper sevens. We'll move to the lower sevens. We start with, where'd they go? They are right here. Taylor Moore, Davis Thompson. Both of these guys I like at 7,400, particularly Taylor Moore. He's a little bit more popular, but he plays easy courses very, very well. And again, the putter is bulky, but you don't have to have the best putting form coming into the RSM. 11th at par 4s. The par 5s, he is top 25 in. He's generally pretty solid all the way around except for this putter. So that's why he's number 2 in my total rankings. He's only played this event once, but he did finish 8th, so you know he at least has the propensity to play this event well. Davis Thompson should be pretty good this week as well. Top 30 at getting birdies or better when it's easy. Proximity, very good. He's very good at the par 5s as well. He's 11th at the 550 to 600 par 5s. A lot to like here with Davis Thompson. Ben Griffin, we talked about. He is one of the 6 players that are top third of the field or top 40 in the 3, overarching filters categories that we talked about this week. I like Ben Griffin again. I think he will continue a very strong fall portion of the season. Lee Hodges, again, like Ben Griffin, one of the 6 players that are top third of the field in all 3 of the categories. I like Lee Hodges quite a bit. Jaeger, I'm only concerned about his performance in the wind. Otherwise, I really like Jaeger. I have an outright ticket on Trey Mullinax. I think he's going to be all or nothing. He's generally pretty darn good when it's easy, but he's not the best in the wind. So that kind of player I try to avoid in DFS and just put an outright ticket on him. because I think his range of outcomes is so wide. I don't want to take that chance in DFS. I'd rather do it on all or nothing. Svensson should be fine. But really, that's really about it in the low sevens. Yes, Russell Knox rates 6th. I would not put him there. He is atrocious in the wind. He's really not played this event very well. He's not the best when it's easy either, or at least not going low when it's easy. Now, he is good when it's short. In fact, 118 is by far his worst statistic, but I don't know. Maybe it's just because I've been burned by Russell Knox too many times, but I'm not a believer in Russell Knox this week. Not this week. So there's a look at the sevens. And again, I just don't see much in the low sevens. I'm generally coming down to about 73. I'll touch Adam Svensson at 7,200. I think he's fine. But really, 7,300 is about the lowest I'm going if I'm not going into the 6Ks. So speaking of the 6Ks, let's talk about a few players here. Chesson Hadley, 5th in my rankings. Again, probably a bit too high, but the metrics love him. Number 1 in par 3s. He's top 15 in putting. If you're going with the Kevin Kisner, Brendan Todd type putting metrics, Denny McCarthy, you got to think about Chesson Hadley as well. He's been playing a lot better. His iron game generally wasn't his strongest suit. He is now 10th in this field. Number 1 at the long par 3s. Again, I would not have him 5th, but I think he's going to be good, especially in the 6Ks. Now, the majority of your fellow contestants are going to Zach Johnson at 7.5% or so. Fair. He has played this event extremely well. He's 5 for 5 in the past 5 years, averaging a top 20 finish. He's just I don't know. This would be the course for him. This is like Kevin Kisner, like Webb Simpson. This is the style of course for him. I'm not there with Zach Johnson, is how I'll say it. John Hunt also getting a little bit of love at 6%. Ryan Armour, 7%. Austin Cook, 6.5% or so. Oh, and then all the way down here at 63 is Dean Burmester. So some of your fellow contestants aren't scared away by his very poor performance last week at Houston, when I thought he was going to be pretty darn good. So really, in the 6Ks, there's only 2 players I've been using, and I've mentioned one of them. It's Chesson Hadley at 6,900. So really don't mind Chesson Hadley. But if you're looking to save some money, do a Seamus Power and Tom Hoge, or Seamus Power and Brian Harmon, trying to fit both 10s, or maybe a 10, a 9, and an upper 8. Take a look at Cameron Percy. Cameron Percy. He has not played this event well, but when it's easy, good. He's not elite, but he's good. He's good when it's short. We've talked about you don't have to have a hot putter coming in. He's 11th in par 3s. He's 20th in par 4s. And he's 15th in 400 to 450 par 4s. He's not higher in my rankings because I have all of these at 10 and 5%, but there's not a bad statistic among this group here. His worst ones is his putting. I think Cameron Percy is going to be okay this week. I really do. I think he's going to be okay this week. I think you're going to be gaining a lot of leverage on your fellow contestants using him, or by using him. Having said that, his tee time is not the best. So a little bit of caution there. But there's a look at the price board and how I'm seeing it. Let's make a few lineups here. But first, we will cover tiers contests. So, in tiers contests, tier 1 now is just Seamus Power and Brian Harmon. Tony Finau used to be in here. Give me Seamus Power. I have to assume that ownerships are close to what they are in Classic. I'm not the most keen on tiers ownerships and such. So or thinking that Seamus Power is going to be more unique than Brian Harman, give me Seamus Power. Otherwise, I think it's pretty much a toss-up in terms of talent. Seamus Power is the one player better analytically, even though it's not saying he is. He's number one when it's short and number one when it's easy. But Harman has played this event so very well. So if you don't care about ownership, then go with analytics versus course form, whichever you prefer. But give me Seamus Power. I'm going to factor in what I think is going to be a little bit less ownership. Tier 2, Tom Hoge, Taylor Montgomery. Let's try that again. Tier 2, Tom Hoge, Taylor Montgomery, Jason Day, Keith Mitchell, and Denny McCarthy. Don't care. Give me Tom Hoge. Don't care. He could be 100% owned. I'm going to take Tom Hoge. Tier 3, Joel Damon, Matthew Neesmith, Matt Kuchar, Sahith Theegala, and Mackenzie Hughes. Neesmith is probably going to be the best choice. He's going to be the overwhelmingly chalky choice. I'm going to go with Matt Kuchar. He has played this event fairly well. It's a Matt Kuchar course. He plays easy courses well, plays in the wind well, plays short courses well. I mean, like I said, he's top 10 in all three of the overarching filters that we talked about this week. So give me Matt Kuchar trying to avoid the chalk in Neesmith and be just as viable, I guess is the word. Tier 4, Patrick Rogers, Taylor Pendrith, Webb Simpson, Kevin Kisner, Justin Rose, Davis Riley, and Brendan Todd. I'm going to go with Patrick Rogers. Webb Simpson and Kevin Kisner, I would not blame you one bit for choosing. They both play this event very, very well. But I'm going to go with the analytics in Patrick Rogers as opposed to the prior course form with Simpson and Kisner, even if Rogers is a little bit more projected owned. Tier 5, Wyndham Clark, Andrew Putnam, Alex Smalley, J.J. Spawn, Aaron Rai, Will Gordon, Harris English. To me, I think there's 2, potentially 3 good choices in here. Wyndham Clark, I love this week. I really like Wyndham Clark. I love Andrew Putnam. Now, he is going to be much more owned, more than likely in Tier 5. But I love Andrew Putnam. I think Spawn could be very sneaky as well. I think it's between one of those 3, Spawn, Putnam, and Wyndham Clark in terms of a tiers contest. Knowing that I'm very, very chalky with Hoge, but I avoided the chalk with Neesmith in Tier 3 by going Kuchar, and I mean, Rogers isn't the most projected owned in Tier 4. I'm probably going to take Andrew Putnam, thinking that I can afford to take 2 tiers of pretty extreme chalk. But I would not hate taking Wyndham Clark. I would not hate taking J.J. Spawn. But based on the 4 previous choices I have made, I'm going to take Andrew Putnam. Whereas if I had taken, say, Matthew Neesmith in Tier 3, him being the most chalky, then I would have to go with Clark or Spawn, probably Clark, because I think it would be too much chalk if I took Putnam in that scenario. But however you feel where your chalk is, if you can afford to take the chalk, take Andrew Putnam, I think. But again, Clark and Spawn, I think Clark and Spawn are going to be good too. Finally, Tier 6, I lied. Ben On, Luke List, Chris Goddard, Cam Champ, Francesco Molinari, Patton Kazire, and Zach Johnson. Well, Zach Johnson's the play if you go on prior course performance. Kazire is pretty interesting, even though the analytics don't love him. He has played this course really darn well, and he's pretty good in the wind. No thanks on Molinari. No thanks on Champ. Goddard, I just haven't seen enough of this fall. Okay. It might be Zach Johnson, actually. You can tell I haven't looked too much in Tier 6. Ugh. It's probably between Patton Kazire and Zach Johnson. I'll take Zach Johnson for the prior course form. But there's not a lot I like here in Tier 6. So there's a look at the tiers contest. Let's move on into classic lineups and figure out how we are going to maneuver around these chalky lineups that your fellow contestants seem to be making. So if we are going with the most chalky lineup that we can make, we're going to have to start with the most chalky player. That's Tom Hoge. And because we are not going into the 10Ks, my guess is we're going to be building a balanced lineup here. I'm going to try to fit the next two highest projected owned. I might not be able to, but we'll go Hoge, Day, and Matthew Neesmith in a kind of a variant stars and scrubs, if you will. If this lineup doesn't fit, then it's just going to be Hoge and Neesmith. But I'm going to try to do a Hoge Day, Neesmith variant, I guess, on stars and scrubs. But with this as their opening three, gosh, dang it. With this as their opening three players, we're going to have to probably come down into the 6Ks or close to there. Again, 6,900. Zach Johnson's getting a little bit of love at 7.7. Knox is at 10.5. I'm going to try to bottom him out at Russell Knox. I think I'll be able to do it because I didn't go into the 10Ks. So Russell Knox at 7,000. That means they have 7,400 per player here. Hey, James, how you doing? Akshay. I think he's at 6,100. I believe I made this yesterday or last night, and I don't think Bhatia was actually populated in Fantasy National. I don't think, because I think he's 6,100. Could be wrong on that, but I think he's 6,100. Are you wanting to try to make a lineup with him? Because if so, I'll just make a stars and scrubs and put Bhatia where I would have my 6K. But you have been on the Akshay bandwagon this week, so I will defer to you if he plays well. But in terms of this chalky lineup that we are trying to formulate here, again, an average of 7,400. We'll kind of take a look around here. You got Ben Griffin, 73. That means your fellow contestants could come up to a 75. Maybe a Taylor Moore. Ben Griffin's getting a whole lot of love, clearly. Spawn actually at 78, but it looks like the most projected owned players in this 7,400 range would be these two. You're leaving $100 on the table, but you are matching almost 15.5% of your fellow contestants with this lineup. Hoge, Day, Neesmith, Moore, Griffin, Knox, and Hoge's my number one player. I'm going to use a ton of Tom Hoge. Neesmith, I really like, and Ben Griffin, I really like. But that is very, very chalky. So there's one variant I can see your fellow contestants going. If they are going with a more, quote, traditional stars and scrubs, you could see probably a Brian Harmon. I want to use a different name than Matthew Neesmith, but I mean, he is so widely popular at 18%. Might just be Matthew Neesmith. And then working their way down, perhaps doing a Davis Riley could potentially fit in here. An 8,100. I guess I said more traditional stars and scrubs, but this is probably going to be looking more balanced. Let's see. You've got Putnam also at 7,900. Let's throw in a JJ Spawn here at 78. Again, this is that same 7,400 range that we had. I will use Ben Griffin just because everybody seems to be using him. 7,500, I mean, kind of take your pick. I'm actually going to drop down a little bit. Try to grab somebody else. Taylor Moore's at 10%. Davis Thompson's at 8.3. So a little bit different of a construction here. Going to leave another 100 on the table, but it's at 13.5%. So there's a look at some of the players and constructions that your fellow contestants are kind of making. I don't know why my mouse is doing that. That's really pissing me off. Ugh. All right. So if we're going to combat that, I'm going to go ahead and make that Stars and Scrubs team, James, and I'll use Akshay Bhatia again. He's not in my rankings. I'm pretty sure he's at 6,100. So I'm going to have to hard code that number in there. But if I'm going stars and scrubs, and if I'm coming all the way down to Akshay Bhatia at 6,100, I mean, I can fit Seamus, who, again, I don't see any reason why he won't play well. And you still have the freedom to go Brian Harman if you want. You can go Tom Hoge if you want the number one most projected owned player. Like, I would go Power Harman, Power Hoge. I'm going to say Tom Hoge and try to find some uniqueness a little bit elsewhere. I have no idea on what Bhatia's ownership is. Let's say 1%. I truly have no idea. So from here we have roughly 8,000 per. I've mentioned Rogers. I like Wyndham Clark at 7%. I'm very high on Wyndham Clark again this week, and we're still into the upper sevens for both of these players here. We can look into the rest of the upper sevens. I've talked about Grayson Sigg, David Lipsky. I'll throw in Grayson Sigg. I'm much higher on Sigg. 8,100 is Davis Riley, if you like Davis Riley, Brendan Todd, Andrew Putnam. I'm going to throw the most chalky name in there at Andrew Putnam, and I imagine. Okay, so he's 6,500. Thank you for checking that. Very good. So that lineup would not fit. So we need 77 or less. Scott Stallings, Will Gordon, I love the player. I don't like the tee time. Chris Kirk, kind of interesting. I also mentioned David Lipsky, who I like. I mean, there's a sub 10%er. You've got Power Hoge, Wyndham Clark. You could even probably drop Lipsky if you're comfortable coming down into the lower sevens. Like, if you're okay with taking a little bit more chalk and Ben Griffin, you can up, Grayson Sigg into the upper sevens again. Andrew Putnam, Alex Smalley, if you're there, JJ Spawn, if you will. I imagine Andrew Putnam would put it maybe around 11%, would be my guess. 11.5. So if you come all the way down to Bhatia, that's, you've got a lot of wiggle room here. And it actually is very, very convenient pricing because Bhatia is just a straight substitute for the player that I like at that same price if I'm doing a Stars and Scrubs. Seamus Power, Hoge. I'm going to do a little bit of a different take. I'm going to use Cameron Percy for my bottom out. Instead, I'm going to use Seamus Power just because he is so much less projected owned than Brian Harman. But I'm going to go with like a Seamus Power, Matt Kuchar. I like Matt Kuchar a lot this week. Matt Kuchar, Patrick Rogers. I used Wyndham Clark in the last example. Maybe a Webb Simpson. This leaves you 7,000. You can obviously maneuver some of this around if you would want, because there's not a lot of players I like at 7,000. Now, Chesson Hadley at 69 is okay, but I generally try not to use 2 6Ks if I have to, or if I don't have to. But that's a lineup that I would be okay submitting. Again, Webb Simpson being in the fact that this is a Webb Simpson course, he has generally played this event extremely well. The analytics don't line up because he's been hurt. But that's a lineup that is pretty darn interesting, and none of these players are projected more than 10% owned. So very, very interesting there. However, what I think most players or I say players, most of your fellow contestants, I don't know, I have to imagine they're going balanced. They could start with Tom Hoge, but even if they don't, let's go with Jason Day. We'll go something to the effect of like a Jason Day, Joel Damon. Again, just trying to use a few different names here. Joel Damon, Mackenzie Hughes getting a little bit of love. in the mid 8s will come down to Brendan Todd. 74, again, this is the 75 and 73. This is the Taylor Moore and Ben Griffin. Another 13.5% or so. I imagine most of your fellow contestants are going this kind of route. They might come up to Hoagie and then disperse this money a little bit elsewhere. But that is what I have for you all for this week at the RSM. In the comments throughout the weekend, please let me know how you are doing. I actually submitted fewer lineups this week. I am throwing my hat in the ring in some Showdown contests, starting that to see how I fare doing my own lineups. Because I've never really entered a contest, even though I go through analyzing and all that stuff. I've actually never done a Showdown contest, so I'm kind of excited to do that, see how it goes. Again, a reminder, Friday night, the Friday Night Chill Stream, 8 p.m. Eastern, I will be doing Showdown content. And then afterwards, I have found a game that I've been enjoying for the past couple of days, so I'll be sharing that with you all, playing that on stream. But we'll be doing a lot of Showdown content Friday evening. And then starting next week, it'll be Tuesday, 9 p.m. Eastern, and Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, for calls in the off season, if you will. But James, thanks for jumping in chat like you always do when you are able to catch the show. I appreciate it. Thanks to everyone out there who tuned in and tunes in, watches and listens, supports the channel. I greatly appreciate it. I really am thankful for the support that you all have shown me show after show, week after week. I love what I do, and I'm having a week like last week at Houston where people did very, very well. Just it makes my week. It really does. Being able to provide you all with analysis that helps you wins money, and that's what we're here for. So thanks for all the support. For all of the wagers that you've made this week for the RSM, for all of the DFS contests you've entered this week for the RSM, for this weekend and every weekend, may all your bets be profitable.